How you going, everybody? Good morning to those watching in Australia and New Zealand. I guess good afternoon, good evening. Feels very formal for those watching here stateside. This is the NFL Brekkie Show for Week 8, all leading up to Raiders at Lions on ESPN today, 11:15 a.m. on ESPN. Over on ESPN2, not the Manning Cast, we've got World Series Game 3. But Laz, I guess I might be one of the first to wish you a happy Halloween, still the 30th of October here stateside. And we have a singular Halloween-inspired kind of segment to start off the show.
You're not the first because my 4-year-old son Charlie found out about Halloween 6 weeks ago. He doesn't know what it is, but he's been centering every request, every activity, every possible toy under the sun around let's do it for Halloween. So it's been a common theme, even though there hasn't been a single Halloween decoration or costume actually lined up. It's just the vibe he's been feeling. But thank you, Phil. A happy Halloween to you as well. Obviously a bigger deal over in the States, but it's catching on here. Look, the kids, they've got the mobile phones and the TVs and the internet and the disco hula hoops.
And
they figure it all out too quickly.
Snap faces and all of it.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Bill Belichick. But we do have one. We have one Halloween themed segment. And it's a concept of have a look down at the lower third there, the strap at the bottom of the screen. Let's do industry talk. Zombies or back for real? There's a bunch of upsets this week. And we'll get to some of the most notable ones in our top segment. It'll flow on through the show. But huge shockers. I'm sure survivor pools and your parlays and your multis out there might have taken a little bit of a hit. But we're trying to figure out these results. Are they a sign that teams are truly back? Are they back for real? It's a true second life in this 2023 regular season and ideally a postseason? Or are they just kind of zombies stomping around making a little bit of noise? Not truly back in the picture, just, upright enough to cause a little bit of a hassle, cause a little havoc. And we're going to comb through there. And I think, Phil, there's no better, if we're talking about huge results, landscape shifting results from week 8, we've got to start with what old Joe Shiesty and the Cincinnati Bengals did up against those San Francisco 49ers.
Laz, this was my preseason Super Bowl pick, Bengals over 49ers. And the way Cincinnati looked yesterday, it doesn't look as crazy as it did in the beginning of September. Joe Burrow looks fit, ready, and able. And you alluded to the fact that there were some results, you and I chatting yesterday as we were kind of planning out this show. Kind of difficult to put this week in a bubble. The only real thing we had was a bunch of road favorites, 14 games outside of that primetime window yesterday, actually 13 games. 9 times was the road team favored in those games. So anytime you have a team that's expected to win in a road environment, you get some funny, clunky results. The Broncos, the mighty Denver Broncos, snapping a 16-game personal losing streak to the Kansas City Chiefs. But yes, the most significant result for the playoff pictures in both the AFC and NFC is Cincinnati completing a season sweep of the NFC West, 4-0 now against the NFC West, and very much they're back. They found their form. Are they zombies or are they back for real? Laz, we look at what they did a year ago. They're back for real. Cincinnati last year lost 3 of its first 5 games. They started 2-3. This year they started one worse. They started 1-3, then 2-3. Now they're 4-3. But what I saw yesterday that makes me think this is a trend more than a blip, and this is something sustainable. Even if they don't ultimately catch the Ravens, who are 6-2 atop the AFC North, this team can win in any environment. We saw them last year win in the snow in Buffalo. We saw them almost go into Arrowhead in January in the AFC Championship game and get a win. Joe Burrow looked like Joe Burrow. If I would have parachuted in from, a 6-week climb of Karsten's Pyramid down in Oceania, one of the 7 summits, hadn't been watching the NFL football, and I saw Joe Burrow and the Bengals beat the 49ers on the road as they did, I'd say, oh, well, yeah, that's Joe Burrow. That's what you'd expect. But this is why it's so significant, because early in the season, this team was stuck in shotgun. Burrow couldn't move around in the pocket. They couldn't protect him. There was no cadence, no rhythm, no ability to get the ball to Jamar Chase. Well, Joe Burrow had a career-high 87.5 completion percent in this game. He had a career-high 19 consecutive completions at one point. On passes more than 10 yards downfield, he was 6 for 7 for 118 yards and a touchdown. And oh, by the way, targeting Jamar Chase, 10 completions on 12 attempts for bang on 100 yards and a touchdown. And if you look at, all you got to do is look at Jamar Chase's game logs. You could blind resume it and tell me which games Cincinnati won and lost based on his production. Even against a very respected San Francisco defense, that normally gets after the passer, normally does quite well going after the passer. Joe Burrow was only pressured on 16% of dropbacks. He found Chase with frequency. Homage is where you get the T-shirt, Laz. This Cincinnati Bengals team looks fit for a run throughout November, December, and hell, even into January.
They're real. They're as real as the denim I'm wearing here, right now, today on the NFL Brekkie Show. And what makes me feel so confident in that is how precise it all is, how calm and composed we know we're getting from Joe Burrow, especially when he's now fit and healthy. But how precise. The way they attacked this defense, the timing of the motion they had before the snap, getting Ja'Marr Chase moving across the formation as a decoy, having him run jet motions just to open up some shotgun runs, not being afraid to use your star player. You just listed the stat line there, going for an even buck and a touchdown. And we'll touch on the touchdown in just a second.
Very symmetrical. 10 catches, 100 yards, touchdown.
Almost enough to get you guys to convert to the metric system, maybe.
Not quite.
But what we saw with not being afraid to use a true one of the elite receivers in the NFL as a decoy at times. Doesn't mean you're not feeding him at other times, but you see him moving in motion so we can using him as a decoy so we get T. Higgins down the field for huge chunk gains, get him going after an up and down from a health and production standpoint start to the season for T. Higgins. They did this in so many different ways. When they run quick hitters outside, quick releases, and when you're running those kind of sweep plays, or you're running screens out to the wide receivers, your bubbles, those type of things, it's all put in the right position. It's all timed up. The blocks meet the arrival of the ball, the catch point. It gives them the maximum opportunity to get upfield. And it's not just the big names. Mixon playing with juice, burst, and explosion again that we haven't seen, I feel like, in 18 months at least of his football. Trenton Irwin having big receptions late in the game. And again, you're seeing him, someone who works in the slot. The pass arrives at the perfect time in the cut, the stem of the route, the break that you see there. It all matches. It's all moving with beautiful synchronicity. And then that touchdown, taking advantage of a 49ers defense that one of its key tenets is aggressiveness. And challenging the outside backs that aren't the most talented members of that defense. Certainly when you look at the defensive line and the linebacker core, that's where the star power seems to be. That's where the star power is for the 49ers defensive unit. Using bunch formations and stacks. It's when you have the wide receivers lined up, not next to each other, not spread out in the usual, what you might expect to see in Madden, but they've got them bang right on top at the line of scrimmage. And using that to challenge those DBs where you do have a talent advantage. And having Joe Burrow, who is so good with ball fakes and so good with subtleties of the quarterback position, shoulder shrug. Not a surprise that Tony Romo's in the commentary box for there, or not inappropriate that Tony Romo's in the commentary box for that, given that was one of his go-to moves. Have him do the shoulder shrug to the quick hitter outside, only for Ja'Marr Chase to then run vertically, turn upfield. You wonder how you get a number one wide receiver wearing number one that wide open. You do that type of subtlety, that type of challenging, it doesn't all have to be trickery. It's just clever design and precise execution with an incredibly cerebral, smart, gifted quarterback. That's how you get someone who should have neon lights around them for the defensive scheme, should have bracket coverage constantly. That's how you get them running wide open free for what really was kind of in a game where they had a turnover on the move off the hands of Ja'Marr Chase, and then perhaps an even more costly one from Irv Smith Jr. in the shadow of the goal line. This thing could have been 3 or 4 scores, really. That last Chase touchdown really put the hammer in. But the Bengals are really back. They did this in so many different ways. We saw them under center more than usual. That run game is getting going. It seemed like such a good – I've talked about the on-field from the coaching standpoint as well. It seemed like schematically they were on point. The way they use the shotgun run, which is a little more delayed than what you're going to see out of traditional kind of under center running. Let's not get too deep in the weed in schematics. But against a 49ers defense that wants to charge up the field on you with all that defensive talent up front, it puts doubt in their mind and it creates creases. This was phenomenal. This was absolutely bona fide for real. Like I said, as is the denim cladding my shoulders right now, the Bengals are for real. They are back.
Laz, the one person you didn't mention in that offense was the one who I was so high on in the draft, the mid-round pick, Andrei Iosivas, the pentathlete from Princeton, going from the Tigers to the Bengals, yet another touchdown for him. But we're both confident in Cincinnati being back and rounding into form, very, very comparable to what they did just 1 year ago, though this time the question being Burrow's fitness appears that he's back on track. Laz, this one I'm kind of torn on. Zombie are back for real. This feels like somebody who may have been bit by a zombie, and they're showing all the signs that they're back, but you got an eye on them. You're not quite sure. It's maybe some of that dramatic tension if they are going to turn.
Did you watch Shaun of the Dead last night? This is sounding, we're pinching some plot points here.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to spoil the end, but also I don't know what the end is here, and I don't know how long it's going to be till we find out. That's the LA Chargers. Because this team, they beat an inferior Bears team at home in primetime. Next week, they're road favorites against the Jets, a Jets team involved in a game with more punts than points yesterday. The Chargers, I don't know what they can do then, even if they get back to 4-4 with a win next week. But what I liked what they did against the Bears is they're coming into a game that two defenses had been a little porous, very porous. And the Chargers basically said, we're going to hold serve. We're going to simplify our game plan offensively. We're going to keep things short, and we're going to make you try and beat us deep. And if you can do both of those things, if you can contain us from marching down the field methodically, almost like a West Coast offense, and you can beat us deep, you can beat us. But Tyson Bagent, I'm going to gamble on the fact that both of those things aren't going to happen, and they didn't. At passes of 5 or fewer air yards, Justin Herbert was 21 of 25. That's an 82% completion rate. He had 177 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks in that scenario. 201 of his 298 pass yards were after the catch. So a lot of catch and run, a lot of Brock Purdy level routes where you're catching the ball and running with it in space. Austin Eckler on the dump down. And then they limited the chunk plays defensively on passes of 10 or more air yards. Chicago just went 4 for 11 for 83 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks. That's notable that 7.7 yards per attempt allowed on passes in the intermediate and deep ranges with 2 interceptions. It's pretty good. It's not great, but the Chargers came in dead last on such throws with 63% completion percentage allowed. They moved the ball methodically. They kept the chunk plays from happening. They forced turnovers. They won handily, as they should have. This is a team that was supposed to challenge the Chiefs atop the AFC West. To this point, the defense hasn't looked great. Awesome. You beat an undrafted free agent rookie QB in his second career start, the first time we had any tape on him at the NFL level. Give me a couple more weeks of this, beat the Broncos twice, and then we can talk about this team being back. Right now, I don't know that we're going to be able to tell this until week 10 or 11.
I think when you look at what the Chargers threw out there last night, I like the way you put it as holding serve. Kellen Moore, not known for a proliferation of screens during his time with the Cowboys as offensive coordinator, but there was a lot of running back work there, whether it's dump offs, whether it's screens. Every time they timed one of those up, it looked like the offensive line had got into good position. The timing was there, and it looked like danger time for the Bears defense with Eckler, who goes for 94 yards through the air. It wasn't a productive day on the ground for him, but he does get in for the score. And that's what we expect from Austin Eckler sometimes, and particularly with where the run blocking has been for the LA Chargers, not just this year, but in previous seasons as well. And they're dealing with some health issues there on the offensive line, as they seemingly are every single year. But Austin Eckler being a huge part of it is the headliner. I think Quentin Johnston having his best game yet and really showing up with some big spots, getting him some yak opportunities, getting him some downfield targets, allowing that athleticism, that big frame to come into the fold was a positive. What we're going to learn, you mentioned some of the schedule coming up, but we're going to learn over the next 4 weeks. They do have matchups. You mentioned the Jets, whilst they're so struggling, they are so limited on offense with what's going on at quarterback there, and we've talked about that enough for multiple seasons. It's a good defense they're up against, and then over the next month, you've got matchups against the Detroit Lions and really the Baltimore Ravens, and I think that's going to be hugely telling where this Chargers team is in the middle class of the AFC and whether, once again, they can instill enough hope in us neutrals who have them penciled in quite often as a second favorite team. Not you, not obviously in the AFC West, but we'll learn a little more. I'm not ready to say. I think you aptly put it. Maybe you've been bitten. Maybe you're back. We're not really sure. But, while we're on the topic of biting, they've bitten us before. The Chargers, we've all been bitten by hope in the Chargers a long time before. So
2021. I had him as my preseason 7 seed in the AFC. Suddenly that's got hope in it. It may happen. But to your point, the margin for error has been really minimized because of what happened in the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah. So look, there's always going to be, with the name brand talent, the level of football that Keenan Allen's playing, with the talent that we know Justin Herbert has, there's always going to be that on-paper belief in the LA Chargers, no matter how many times they do Charger. This was a good step in a matchup that was put there on a platter for them to get into some form. Now we wait and see against some tougher opponents over the next 4 weeks, whether it's sustainable. And I do think I mentioned Austin Eckler, going for 2 yards on the ground and then not having a productive day on the ground. They're going to need to be more balanced. I'm all for passing early. I'm all for passing on early downs. I'm all for passing often. But against some of these better defenses, more complete teams that's on the schedule, you're going to have to be. Kellen Moore's unit is going to have to be more balanced, particularly considering how unconvincing the defensive side has been for so long.
Laz, last one here. Zombie, you're back for real. I'm going to go zombie on this one. The car's been idling for 7 weeks. The car got into gear in Indianapolis. The Saints march in to the Colts home. They put up 38. David Carr throws for 310. The reason I'm going zombie on this one, you got 153 receiving yards on 3 targets to Rashid Shaheed. So listen, if you can get 51 yards per attempt to a second-year undrafted rookie at a Weber State, awesome. But what this did against, by the way, the worst scoring defense now in the NFL, that the Denver defense has woken up finally. The Colts have the most points per game allowed in the entire league. They gave up 39 in a heartbreaking loss to the Browns in week 7. They gave up 38 here. They gave up 30-plus 2 weeks ago. Carr goes for 310. Shaheed takes the top off of the defense. One that really should have been an interception for the Colts. They get hard done by a call at home again. Yeah. Shaheed benefits from that. It should have given the Colts the ball down a score at their own 15-yard line in the fourth quarter. I wouldn't have much confidence in them to drive the length of the field, but a little hard luck there. Yet still, taking the top off the defense, as Rashid Shaheed did, really allowed Alvin Kamara to operate in a way that we haven't yet seen him be able to catch and run. He's a lot of receptions, but he has these games where it's like 13 catches for 12 yards. I mean, he's catching everything behind the line of scrimmage. They're long handoffs with numbers not in his favor. He had 51 receiving yards. 37 of those were after the catch. Where I do have hope for the Saints is their schedule really lines up here for a run. They go Bears, Vikings, Falcons, Lions, forget that one, Panthers, Giants. So you have Panthers, Giants, Vikings, Falcons, Bears as 5 of your next 6. Keep that car moving up the gears. I can't drive a stick. And I don't know that David Carr can drive this offense, but they should get results. And even if they're the ugly 17-16 type results they were getting early in this season, with the quarterback headache in Atlanta, and honestly, the murky wild card picture in the NFC with a lot of these teams, the Vikings in particular, losing their quarterback for the season, the Saints should do enough to win the division. If they don't, they should do enough to make the playoffs. If they don't, Dennis Allen needs to be looking for a job. But I don't think this team is back for real, though it's lining up for them to get some empty calories and find their way to the 4 seed and a home game in the NFC playoffs just by attrition and regulation that the NFC South winner, even if they're 9-8, will host a playoff game.
And I don't think they're going to be 9-8, considering you look at where they find themselves standing right now in the NFC South. They're at 4-4. You mentioned the next 6 weeks. It wouldn't stun any of us if they rolled out 5 wins from that 6. Right. And now we're talking about a team that's 9-5 going into the final month or so of the season. I think Kamara is a huge part of this. He looks rejuvenated. He's looked far better this season as his legs have got under him as well. You come back first week, especially after you're off for the first 3 weeks for a suspension, but he's looking more comfortable, more patient. That offensive line has not been consistent in any way possible. They don't win a lot of battles up front. Playing the Colts certainly can help there, but he showed a lot of burst between the tackles. He's starting to make some of those receptions count or he's being put in position to make some of those receptions count for a little more than a yard per reception, or a yard per target, as it were, a few weeks back. We're starting to see a little more gains from him. He is so clever at this stage of his career. There is still burst left in his legs, and he does run with great balance, but he's so clever on those running back routes, the little in-breakers, the ones when he's running, options out of the backfield. His understanding. It would not surprise me if you spoke to Alvin Kamara and he had a great command of what particularly defensive front, but what their schematics were, because he seems to understand leverage in those situations when he's put in position to run routes out of the backfield. He does, despite not being, this is not someone out of Miami who's running 4-2, 4-3 out of the backfield, but he's constantly creating himself room in those situations. So yeah, I think overall this is more zombie than back for real, but this zombie does not have a lot of opposition in front of it for the foreseeable future, so they can get on a real run. All right.
So it's like an I Am Legend zombie, the alternate ending, maybe?
Yeah, putting my hand up here, never had any interest and have not watched I Am Legend.
Wow, it's a decent film.
Yeah,
for a genre in which I typically don't partake, I enjoyed that one.
Yeah, my zombie intake is a little lesser. Probably Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland. Probably hits the areas a little more.
And you changed the name of the segment to Zombie or Back for Real. Here we are. All right, Lodge. Well, somebody, a team, a situation that could have qualified for that. We had a lot of sizzling opinions as we now head to our hot take hotline, brought to you by Macca's. And we're going to talk, is Tennessee back for real? Is Will Levis the quarterback of the future? And then as soon as we turn on the griddle, I mean, you thought it was a Nashville barbecue. Hot take hotline all the way down. So, Laz, we're going to start with Andrew, and I'm going to read this quoted as it was copied to me. Will Levis takes Tennessee to the playoffs. And then we had a math equation. Reasonable remaining schedule plus apparent QB upgrade equals playoffs. Laz, your take on Andrew's hot take.
I want Andrew in charge of the grill at barbecues. I want him manning the burgers. I want him to make sure the sausages are cooked properly.
Get him a little apron that says grill power.
Yeah, but that's just because I know he's going to bring the heat. I don't know that I'm ready to, with the way the AFC is lining up, I'm not on board with this. We're too hot here. There's the flames are on high, charcoal's happening, we're charring absolutely everything. Sausages, I'm fine with. Steak, preferably not. I don't need to be eating jerky when I was hoping for a nice tender bit of steak. I do like jerky though. Yeah, this is as fun as it was with Will Levis's debut, the 4 touchdowns, the instant chemistry with DeAndre Hopkins. We were joking around with some old 50 Cent lyrics, but talk about putting a DB in a chokehold on that first touchdown. It looked like he was about to give the guy a noogie. That's what we called it here. I don't know what you call it.
It's a noogie here too.
Yeah, just had him tucked under, ready to drive the knuckle into the top of to just really rub the nasty friction up there whilst taking a huge deep ball touchdown. It was something to behold. We got the way he backs away when he throws the ball. Will Levis is quite artistic. Probably gives you a little more, draws memories a little closer towards perhaps a fadeaway along the baseline of the NBA that's kicked up. Of course, you can watch so many games on ESPN. Make sure you tune in throughout the NBA season.
Saturday morning, I'll be on the sideline in Milwaukee.
There you go. So there's so much fun to be had, and considering the drop off in quarterback play we've seen across the league with some of the backups that have come in this year, so a huge number of them, particularly in that early slate for Week 8 yesterday, far too much backup quarterback football. It's great to see someone with Will Levis who didn't have the easiest draft profile, who's, whether you want to say he stock dropped or he was always kind of a fringe first rounder, second round type of talent, someone that the shine definitely came off compared to some of the other rookie quarterbacks in this class. When you're looking at the Anthony Richardsons who bolted up, or Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, et cetera, it's nice to see that, with time on spending a couple months of the regular season on the bench and taking it in, getting used to the speed, the game speed, all that kind of stuff, that he could adapt and find his footing very quickly and play to his game. That deep shot, that arm talent, we know that's there with someone like Levis. He's also providing one of the more annoying autocorrects for everybody across the world trying to tweet about Levis, particularly if you're going for Levis's debut and you're getting an apostrophe in there and then you're getting Levi's.
I was so mad about that because I thought I'd say, hey, real comfortable quarterback. And that's not Levi's. That's a different jeans company.
It is. Look, to borrow another autocorrect, Phil, it was ducking annoying. But nonetheless, with Will Levis, no, we're not ready to put them there. Particularly you guys, if you've watched the show, you know the love I have for Trevor Lawrence down in that AFC South region there, and they get a big W. We'll touch on the Jags in a little bit. It's too hot. Let's calm it down a little bit.
No. It's Andrew, on my barbecue, any holiday, you can fire up the grill, man. You can manage it. This is a medium. I prefer medium rare, but this is a medium to medium well, not overdone.
This is well done with tomato sauce on the side.
Laz, here's why. Well, the biggest reason, I'll do the biggest reason first. I won't invert it. It's a 4-way tie right now in the AFC at 4-3. It does get thick. There's that top 5, right? The 4 division leaders who are all 6-2: Kansas City, Miami, Jacksonville, Baltimore. Buffalo's sliding right in there. On any given day, they can beat any one of those teams. Then it's a whole mess at 4-3. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, the Jets, and Cincinnati. Pittsburgh, who's been outscored by 34 points this season, and plays Tennessee on a short week Friday morning on ESPN. I mentioned 3 teams that are in the same division. There's going to be a lot of schedule fixture cannibalism in there. I don't think the Jets are going to remain a winning team. What you have to worry about is Cincinnati claiming one of 2 spots of those 4 teams. So I mentioned the top 5. That leaves 2 teams left. I'm going to pencil in Cincinnati as the 5. And now you're talking, all Tennessee has to do is outlast Pittsburgh, Cleveland, the Jets, and then from the rear, the Chargers. I still think the Chargers are going to charger. I had them as the 7 seed in the preseason. I don't think Will Levis is going to throw for 319 and 4 touchdowns, no picks every week, but he showed an adeptness with the deep ball that teams will need to respect. Minka Fitzpatrick left that game injured. Who knows his availability for this Friday morning or his level of fitness? The stat that I love that really shocked me, Levis, on passes of 30 or more air yards, he had 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. In the last 42 games, all Titans quarterbacks, no such touchdowns and 5 picks on 30 or more air yards. You give Derrick Henry that room underneath to operate late in the game with that deep ball threat, that connection with Nuke Hopkins. This team isn't gonna blow anybody away, but to say they could sneak in the playoffs, given the equation Andrew gave us, that math for me checks out.
All right, well, let's see if this math checks out for you while you're cooking over there with Andrew, while you're feeling the heat there and enjoying your well-done meats.
Do you prefer asparagus with your burger? Throw those on the grill.
Asparagus?
Yeah,
asparagus?
Grilled asparagus with some lemon and butter?
No, mate, grilled onions and pickles. Come on now. Kieran, Will Levis' career will be better than Tom Brady's. I'm not overreacting. Phil?
Kieran, I love the routine contribution. The fire marshal would not allow us to allow you to man the grill with that take. Will Levis's career will be better than Tom Brady's.
Name of the segment.
I'm not overreacting. If you have to say I'm not overreacting, you probably are. It's like, I don't mean to insult you, but it's going to insult you. So the I'm not overreacting as the suffix to a hot take means it's too hot of a take.
But he fits the brief here because this is the hot take hotline. And he, Kieran, a true Titans fan, he rides the highs, he rides the lows. He knew what they were getting into this season with the state of that offensive line. And, the spark of hope is going to
I give Levis the keys. 1 start, you have the keys to the rest of the season. You're an upgrade at quarterback. You give us the better chance of making the playoffs than Ryan Tannehill. Thomas Edward Patrick Brady's status is safe for now.
Yes. Kieran and Brad also wanted to fire these ones off. A little addendum or a little amendment or an addendum or an addition from Kieran to his take and Brad chiming in. Kieran's got Ryan Tannehill to the Vikings ahead of the deadline, which is ticking down. Hours and hours are coming off the clock there. And we've got Ryan Tannehill to the Falcons from Brad. Let's judge those quickly. If you're seeing Tannehill on the move, which I know you've got some quotes there related to that topic, which way are you sending him? You sending him north? Sending him south? I have no idea about geography in the US, but I think that was right.
Yeah, I looked at the draft capital for both of these teams. Both have that early day 3 pick that it seems like most people are valuing Tannehill at. Both of them in the upper half, the lower part of that upper half, but they have enough if there's some creative salary cap work, they can take on this deal. I mean, I've seen some sizzling takes about San Francisco should trade for Tannehill because they have the most cap space. And I'm looking through just making sure no trade has happened because Adam Schefter firing off Contavious Street to the Falcons. So the Falcons have done some business. Of those 2, I think the Vikings is more desperate. Though the conversation with them is should they be sending players out as part of their rebuild? They beat Green Bay. They're 4-4. I fully expect the Lions to move to 6-2 today. I don't think the Vikings have a run in them. The crazy thing is, as part of a loaded slate of fixtures in Week 9, the Falcons and Vikings play each other, Laz, this weekend. So if one of them, if they're bidding for Ryan Tannehill, and you alluded to the quote, Mike Vrabel said yesterday, asking rhetorically and then answering, does Levis's performance change a situation that we would listen to trade offers? I think we owe it to the team to listen as diligently as possible on anybody that would call, regardless of player, person, or position, just to make sure we're doing right by the football team. That is him saying without saying, we would love to move Ryan Tannehill. I would trust our general manager to do so. They just need the right offer. In terms of draft capital, it's not a high offer to get him. Gosh, Laz, of those two, I mean, maybe the Falcons only just.
I go Falcons here, despite the fact that the Vikings had the record that they did in 2022. When you look at the actual state of the roster, throw in that Justin Jefferson's on injured reserve. When you look at the state of the roster, I think the Falcons are farther along. I think the reason that it's sad where it's gone, but the reason the Vikings record is where they were and that they turned this season around after it looked like regression had come for them with all sorts of furious anger is that Kirk Cousins was playing with some of the best football, arguably the best football of his career, torn Achilles. He's out for the season. Who knows where his future lies, but I think that's just that's the decision being made. I think it's almost being taken out of their hands, the Vikings. They need to look at acquiring assets here for the next chapter of their football team, as hard as that is. And as much as Kirk Cousins, I think we can sit here sometimes, particularly with a player like Kirk Cousins that has had two destinations in his NFL career, but there's been so much focus on his money and his free market pricing at times and his journey through that. We can be a little, treated a little like chess pieces, just moving them around the board with little ease. He clearly means a lot to that Vikings operation, but where their roster's at, the potential they may have with an early first round pick, with the way this season could go, and really the limit on what they could actually do with this roster for the rest. At best, the best case scenario would be a first round knockout in the playoffs, I think, and a draft pick with limited capital and limited movability for you. So I'd lean towards the
adult move for Minnesota would just say, last year was fun. We got lucky. We punched above our weight. The rebuild needs to start now, because all that we're doing is just pushing out the rebuild. And to have a ceiling that's higher than a first-round playoff exit, which I completely agree with, the sooner we start the rebuild, the sooner we realize that potential ceiling.
Whereas you and me have spent too much time this season talking about the play of Desmond Ridder. He leaves the game, has a concussion check. He clears it, but he's kept out of the game. They say not for performance reasons. We see Taylor Heineke come in, but we know the weapons there. We know what's waiting. Like Drake London is doing phenomenal with what he's getting.
And the relationship with Arthur Smith, the former offensive coordinator in Tennessee.
I would like to see, Tannehill, even if we take away, week one can be a bit of a wonky week for a lot of people. For Ryan Tannehill this season against the Saints, it was no touchdowns and 3 interceptions. This is going to warp your numbers. Since then, it's not like he's lit up. He lit it up in the games that he played, partial or fully. 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And we're going, he's having some performances around that 250-yard mark. The completion percentage is nice. Again, if you wipe out that first game where it was really quite horrid and low, you are looking in that high 60s, 70s range for completion percentage. So that's great. Ryan Tannehill is not the version that we saw years back where he was standing proud in that pocket off that heavy play action, targeting downfield. We know age comes. But given what we've seen in Atlanta, given the familiarity with Arthur Smith that you mentioned, that's where I'd send him. All right, we got to keep this moving because we've got about 16 minutes left on the clock and a bit to get through. Hot take hotline. Moving on from there, we've done trade targets. We've done Will Levis. Okay, this one came in.
I'll try stretch, Laz. Just gonna.
Yeah, this is a dangerous take more than a hot take, and it's dangerous for Broncos fans like my friend Phil, who did not include the mighty Denver franchise, the resurgent Denver franchise, who knocked off the Kansas City Chiefs 24-9 in one of the boilovers of the season. Did not mention them in the AFC teams that could come from the depths of the rankings to make a charge of that 6th or 7th spot, the wild card spots there in the AFC playoff picture. But Joshua says, imagine Denver playing well against Kansas City and then the Bills next up in back-to-back games. Then the Vikings, Browns, Texans, all winnable. Imagine they are 6-6 with 5 games to go, including a double against those Chargers. Phil, is there any reason or hope to believe, knowing we've got 15 minutes on the clock, is there any reason to believe that Russell Wilson-led Broncos, really the Sean Payton-led Broncos, make a run and turn this what looked like an abominable season coming in into something mildly competitive and entertaining for folks like you?
Well, Laz, it's just great to get that counter that was going up every time they met the Chiefs, division rival. Denver used to own this division, and then they won the Super Bowl, and reset happened, and then that's been the Chiefs ever since. 16 consecutive losses to the Chiefs and approaching a dubious NFL record that they wanted no part of. It's great to see that come to an end. You have to remember, Denver has always played, not always, but in the last 3 years, they played the Chiefs close routinely. Denver now 4-1 against the spread against the Chiefs in the last 5, and the one miss was by half a point. The one loss where they lost by 11 when they were getting 10.5. If the defense had looked like this in the early part of the season, Denver would be 4-4 or 5-3, but they didn't. And Denver still has one of the tougher remaining strength of schedules. You can't just throw out, imagine if they play well against Buffalo. Now, I will say Buffalo has a very difficult, very emotional trip to Cincinnati, in the featured game on ESPN Monday morning next week. Win or lose, that's going to take a lot out of that team. And then Denver's on the bye, meanwhile. Then they go to Buffalo for Monday Night Football. I mean, the math there adds up to Denver potentially playing them close, but that's a lot of ifs. And then, Minnesota, Cleveland, Houston are all winnable. Raiders at home should have been a win. Commanders at home should have been a win. Denver did not win those games. Should have won, has not played out for this team. Sure, if the defense can force 5 turnovers like they did against Patrick Mahomes, and Russell Wilson can do just enough, was it 12 of 19 passing, and with 6 sacks taken, some of those strategic, late in the game, but still 6 sacks taken. I think all this does is kind of dig the heels in the Denver front office to not sell at the trade deadline. It probably costs them one of the elite quarterbacks in the next draft. Not to say that's the worst thing. If they're keen on that second tier, that Michael Penix, Shedeur Sanders, in the middle of the first round or 10 to 15 area, great. Drake May or Caleb Williams are now an afterthought. But I am not placing any wagers on Denver finding a way to 9-8 or 10-7 and being that second team after Cincinnati. It's really Buffalo, Cincinnati, and one more wild card spot as it stands. Somebody other than Denver, be it Pittsburgh, Cleveland, the Jets, the Titans, the Chargers, will get that spot ahead of the mighty, mighty Denver Broncos.
I think you've said it all there. I don't need to heap on. I just enjoyed throwing that line out there and seeing what type of bite we got. I will say, though, through 8 weeks, we like to go into a little more insightful statistics than just counting touchdowns and interceptions. But Russell Wilson currently has 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. If after the regular season, if we extrapolate that over 17 games, if you double it, that would be 16 games. That would be 32 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Let's throw one. Let's say the last game is a 1 touchdown, one interception effort from Russell Wilson. If he finishes the season with 33 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, is Sean Payton Coach of the Year?
No.
I'm just being mean to you today. All right.
I mean, the thing is, he has been serviceable. His worst game by far was the last game against Kansas City. Had he played like he did yesterday in that game, Denver would have had a chance to win that game in Arrowhead. He had been fine through the first 4 weeks. It was overshadowed by a defense that up until week 4 or 5 was the worst scoring defense in the NFL. After being one of the best the year before, the defense finally finds its footing and then the offense gets out of sync. Well, now they have back-to-back wins over the Packers and Chiefs. On course to respectability is what Denver is.
Okay.
7-10, hold our head high. We're not an embarrassment.
Serviceable is fair, but a family sedan that's 15 years old and needs the interior done is serviceable. But it's not what you pay for when you're offering Mercedes-Benz prices. All right, we got one more related hot take for later that we'll touch in. It's more of a hot prospect or a hot chance for next week. But let's move on. We got a zoo. We've got 10 minutes. We've somehow got to get through 2 segments. Who is the real AFC lister? Who's the real A lister? And Phil, this is one that you threw out there with all 4 top of the AFC division teams right now at 6-2, that would be the Baltimore Ravens, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'm quickly vamping because I've forgotten which. Oh, and the Miami Dolphins. There we go. I forget about the East occasionally. There's only one East division in my heart. You know that, Phil. Who are you most convinced by? Who is the real main event? Who's the real headliner? Who deserves to hold, not take into the offseason, but hold the AFC strap right now? Who's the current number one top dog in the AFC, Phil?
Well, Laz, as the tiebreaker goes, it's Kansas City, Miami, Jacksonville, Baltimore in that order. Now we have a 9-week sprint with all of these teams left to get through the end of the season. They all have a bye ahead. I mean, and Kansas City and Miami play each other in Germany this weekend. One of the marquee games of the season that you will, I don't know how you're going to do it. Stay up late, get up early, get caffeinated. For me, it's very convenient. Sunday morning. The most consistent team in the last 5 weeks has been Jacksonville. They're 5-0. The hottest team is Baltimore. The final score in Arizona, the backdoor cover by the Cardinals, does not reflect that Baltimore was in control of that game from middle of the first quarter onward. The team with the highest ceiling for me is the Miami Dolphins because their offense is so incendiary. But if I'm having to pick an A-lister, I'm picking the best quarterback on the planet with the second best defense of these 4. I'll give the Ravens a nod. Since they acquired Roquan Smith, they have the best scoring defense in the NFL last season and a half. But the Kansas City Chiefs defense is vastly improved from last year when they won the Super Bowl. The offense has been slow going. My concern with Kansas City, the drops and the miscues and the mistakes. They had 4 drops against Denver. Sky Moore had one in the end zone that could have changed the trajectory of that game. They have an NFL worst 19 drops. If they can catch the ball, they're my pick. They are my A-lister today because they have the best quarterback. They've done it before. They have the track record, and they have the second best defense of the 4. But it wouldn't surprise me. Jacksonville was my preseason AFC pick to have the number 1 seed. I still think that might be the route because their strength of schedule of the 4 is the easiest, though I don't think any of these teams will be terrified about going into Jacksonville, all due respect to Duval, in January and getting a win.
I like this conversation right now because my, adoration for Patrick Mahomes as the greatest quarterback I've ever seen play the game is noted. Trevor Lawrence is my MVP pick, and the Baltimore Ravens my Super Bowl champion pick. I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens. I hear what you say about the Kansas City Chiefs there. They're an absolute force when firing. It's not even just the drops. They've had catches and then fumbles that turn the ball over in costly possessions, not to mention, hey, you're talking dropping the ball. How about dropping the ball on special teams there and giving the ball to your mighty Denver Broncos in the shadow of the goal line? So, So when I look at the Baltimore Ravens, why I lean there, though, offensive line playing at a really good clip and hopefully maintaining some level of health, particularly when you look at figures like a Ronnie Stanley. They're beating you in different. This wasn't the most explosive Lamar Jackson game. It didn't need to be against the Cardinals game. Look, 31-24 against the Cardinals. This was a multi-score game for most of that second half there. They come back late with a couple of scores, and we have some fun with some onside kicks and whatnot. But you're getting Gus Edwards having a massive day, sitting there on my fantasy bench, feeling really good. No one cares about your fantasy team, but hey, Gus Edwards draft is out there. If he was on your bench, I feel for you. They're beating you in different ways. We know about the defense. Again, a team, I wouldn't be surprised if in the coming hours we heard of a little move, a little shake that they tried to make and throw themselves up there.
I keep refreshing my Adam Schefter X, whatever the hell we're calling it now, feed to make sure we're not missing anything. Daniel Carlson will play tonight. And,
as will Amon Russ. Absolutely. And we'll get to those in just a sec because we've got 6 minutes to get out of here, Phil. But I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens. I will say, I know we did trades last week, and it's one I mentioned, but after watching what happened with the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm not at panic stations. And what's happened with the Bucs since we did that episode, predictably losing to the Buffalo Bills, I'm calling about Mike Evans. I'm absolutely calling about Mike Evans. Think about Mike Evans, some of his biggest moments in his career, right? I mentioned last week, old money signal at Texas A&M, working with Johnny Manziel and the should we call inventive extrapolation of plays that occurred on that field there down there at Texas A&M. And we think about Jameis Winston and some of the high points there, even the 30 for 30 season. You think about Ryan Fitzpatrick and Fitzmagic getting hot. We're talking about aggressive, creative, downfield second phase play types of quarterbacks, I think it could be an easy move there. Again, his salary is not too bad for the Chiefs to take on. I'm making that call because I'm not putting my dynasty literally in the hands of some of the receiving talent. I like Sky Moore coming out of college, like Fetch. I don't think it's going to happen. Let's not try and make it happen. Let's try and make a move. All right, let's keep it moving. That was who our A-listers are. And Phil, let's hope we got some A-list picks the rest of the way as we close this thing out.
Yeah, Laz, it is time for Popular Demand, brought to you by Tab. On the season, we're staying hot. We were 3-1 collectively last week, Laz. On the year, quick maths, we're up to plus 7.75 units in 8 weeks. Here's the thing, people of the NFL Brekkie Show. Your boy's responsible for plus 790 of that. Laz, breaking even in wagering. Please gamble responsibly is difficult. And you are minus 0.15 units on the year. How does do I lead off or do you lead off? How do you want to work this? You lead off. You lead off.
I'll lead off today. Look, Jahmyr Gibbs has been a feature when in the passing game, particularly in recent weeks. We're seeing his talents. I don't expect him to have a monstrous day against the Las Vegas Raiders, but the Raiders have given up plenty of completions to running backs of lesser obvious receiving skill set than a Jahmyr Gibbs. I've got him at 4 or more receptions. It's moved around. It's currently at $1.72 is the number. It's moved between $1.72 and $1.68. You can check those. Those figures are correct as of today, 31st of October. I've got Jahmyr Gibbs in a game where you do see Amon-Ra St. Brown active and against a secondary or against a defense that is never going to overwhelm you. And in a game where if you do look at ways that the Las Vegas Raiders could disrupt the Detroit Lions, you look at a Max Crosby and you look at the pressure that he could create. The idea of negating him by getting Gibbs out of the backfield and getting some quick completions there and putting some pause in the mind of the defensive line. So I'm going 4+ for Jahmyr Gibbs, who's been ascendant. I know for those that drafted him in fantasy, I know he hasn't had the proliferation of touches that you would have hoped to see expand over the opening 2 months of the season. But we are seeing gradually, while the running game attempts are never going to be sky high at this point of his career, we are seeing his skill set utilized in the passing game.
Okay, Laz. Detroit is -7, little juice on Detroit. The total has dropped from 46.5 to 45.5, a little juice on the over. Unders in primetime games this season, 18-7. That's a 72% hit rate. Now I'm coupling that in a multi with the trend that the Vegas Raiders are very bad in the first half and the Detroit Lions are quite good. On the road in the first half money line and against the spread, the Raiders are 0-4 this season, whilst the Lions money line and against the spread are 3-0 at home. Detroit last week gave up 28 points before they got a first down. Everybody said, Dan Campbell said, we needed to be kicked in the backside. We needed this. So I'm taking a defensive effort from the Lions and a first half lead. Them getting off to a hot start, paced by their defense against the Raiders offense that at times has been limited this year, irrespective of who's under center. So I'm taking a multi first half, under 23.5 total points, and Detroit on the money line. Detroit, it's a 3-way wager. Detroit has to be leading. A tie, you lose. This pays $2.70. So $2.70 for at halftime, Detroit to be winning. They can be winning 17-6. They can be winning 22-0. But 24 more points or Raiders being level or ahead loses this wager.
All right, we got 90 seconds on the clock. Let's see if we can get both picks done and more the ship, as it were. Let's go Josh Reynolds over 21.5 yards as his longest reception. He has cleared that in all but one game so far this season. Here, courtesy of ESPN, here are the numbers. 33, 22, 26, 27, 21, and then 22 as his long receptions. He's been an unsung hero on that positive ascending Lions offense, especially when you do have, high first round picks like Jameis Winston coming back in the fold. Amon-Ra St. Brown established himself, and Sam Laporta getting eyes on him. But in a spread out offense, I look for Josh Reynolds to pull in that one big reception that he does with routine effort, and you're getting that one right now at $2.10.
Laz, I was going to take a Josh Reynolds $2.10 market over 40.5 receiving yards because he's hit that in all 5 games he's played. In fact, he's gone 50 or more in 4 of the 5 games. But I saw you did a Josh Reynolds over prop. I'm giving that to the people, but my official NFL Brekkie Show popular demand brought to you by Tab pick is on Halloween, why wouldn't I go with somebody whose name is eerily close to Mike Myers? Michael Mayer, Raiders tight end. In the Raiders' 2 wins this season, he's cleared 30 yards receiving. In the 3 losses, he hasn't come close. This is not causation correlation. I'm not picking the Raiders in this game, but I think the Raiders know their best route to victory, get the tight end involved, and the Lions give up the 5th most receiving yards per game to opposing tight ends. Denver's the worst. Chargers are the 2nd worst. You could have guessed those. Detroit's toward the top of that next tier of tight end vulnerability. Michael Mayer, not Michael Myers, Michael Mayer over 30.5 receiving yards at $2.30. Not for nothing, your boys hit 8 in a row in this segment, Popular Demand, brought to you by TAP. You can ask yourself, who's winning this competition? It's me. You can also ask yourself, what are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.
All right, Phil, we have done it. We are seconds away from the room entirely shutting down and turning into a Halloween festival. That's not actually true, but effectively,
really quickly, I know we have one wager before we go, right?
We do have one more. Thank you for reminding me. Yes. One Dak Prescott saying that rather than not poking the bear in regards to the Eagles matchup coming up next week, a belter of a Week 9 schedule, he said, no, pour the honey on me. I want it. I want the fight with the bear. You see me, if I got the chance to fight the bear, pour the honey on me. Started spawning out all sorts of pour some sugar on me. I'm hot, sticky, sweet. Lyrics from Def Leppard. Andrew Campy said that, if the Cowboys get up, this is a regular listener, friend of the show. Andrew Campy said, if the Cowboys get up, Loz, you got to pour some honey on your next show. I said, no, don't worry about that. If the Cowboys get up against the Eagles, I will come dressed fully as a member of Def Leppard. Great band, great tunes over the years. So that one's out there. Stay tuned for that next week. Phil, get us on out of here.
Yeah, Laz, the Lions hope it's not a bear market for them. They hope it's a bull market as they return home after an embarrassing loss. That game kicks off at 11:15 a.m. Sydney, Melbourne time on ESPN. The World Series will be underway already on ESPN2. Good time for multi-screen viewing, so be sure to pull up the ESPN app for live scores, streams, highlights, and news. News of the day, NFL Week 8 in the books. This has been the NFL Brekkie Show. He's Laurie Horesh. I'm Phil Murphy. Thank you for watching.